Thank you for joining Resilient Cyber. My name is Chris Hughes, along with my co-host, Dr. Nikki Robinson.
Hey, everybody.
And today we're joined by Josh Reiter. Josh, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, definitely. We're excited to chat with you. But before we dive in, do you mind telling us a bit about your background and what you're up to right now?
Sure. I'm Josh Reiter. I'm the Deputy Principal Cyber Advisor on the Secretary of the Navy staff. And I dual hat as the Department of Navy CIO's Chief Workforce Officer, looking at the cyber workforce issues for the Department of the Navy.
Yeah, very cool. I wanted to ask you that position of Principal Cyber Advisor, I believe it's relatively new within the last, few years or so, if I'm not mistaken. What exactly does a Principal Cyber Advisor or Deputy Principal Cyber Advisor do for the Navy?
So the Principal Cyber Advisor was a position created by Congress in the FY20 National Defense Authorization Act. It basically looks at the more operational side of cyber, where CIO looks at enterprise IT, PCA looks at cyber operating forces, looks at operational technology, industrial control systems, security of weapons systems, and facility-related control systems. And then the other main function of the Principal Cyber Advisor is budget certification authority over all of the cyber activities for the military departments. So there's a Principal Cyber Advisor at the OSD level, and then there's one for the Department of the Air Force, one for the Department of the Army, one for the Department of the Navy. Obviously for the Navy, we covered the Navy and the Marine Corps. And to steal a line from a Marvel movie, as Deputy PCA, I do what the PCA does, only slower.
I like that. No, that's awesome. I mean, covering so much ground. It's amazing. Well, to immediately just switch gears and talk about workforce, right? I know that there's been a lot of talk about workforce challenges, types of skills that people might need. And that's in a cyber program in general, right? Not just, DoD or DON, but what types of skills do you look for if you're looking for any type of cybersecurity professional when it comes to, building that workforce?
So interesting the way you phrase that. So me personally, I might see the world a little differently than the average hiring manager. For me, I look for growth mindset, not as the platitude that you would normally see, but legitimate intellectual curiosity, the ability for self-directed learning, and somebody who has a demonstrated track record of being able to adapt to new situations and develop new skills on the fly, and a positive attitude. And with those two things, everything else is kind of secondary. There's no shortage of courses to teach any of the so-called hard skills. So if they come to the fight with the ability to learn something quickly, the ability to find out information on their own, and a positive attitude towards just getting the mission done, that to me is the top quality that I look for. Because even within cyber, we're now up around over 70 different work roles within our cyberspace workforce, everything from, system architecture to physically pulling cables through the ceiling, everything from AI, DevSecOps, all related but very different skills. Some people need to be able to code. Some people will never type a line of code in their entire career. So I don't think there's a magic bullet in terms of, any particular skill within the STEM field. I think it's the ability to learn any particular STEM skill as quickly as possible. There's a great line developing in terms of AI. There are people who say AI will replace you. There are people who say AI won't replace you, but somebody who can leverage AI better than you will. I'm a firm believer in that second one. So for me, it's someone who has a demonstrated track record of being able to integrate new technologies into what they do and to basically go into any technological field and play it like a musical instrument they've been playing their whole life.
Yeah, I like that answer actually, because I've been in cyber almost 2 decades, and I feel like it is a grind of just constantly learning and developing, and new technologies. You got to learn, you got to get up to speed, and then as soon as you think you start to learn a certain niche or domain, you realize, oh wait, I barely know anything, and there's this huge mountain ahead of me still. I need to keep grinding out, learning and developing. So I want to ask you too, in the DoD space, I was active duty Air Force, I was a federal civilian with the Navy too. And there's a lot of focus on digital modernization, zero trust, AI, cloud, all these things. Why do you think the workforce gets overlooked in that conversation so much? Despite all of us agreeing it's so critical, but it just seems not to get the attention. Is it, not so flashy? What do you think it is?
So I think it all relates to how we frame things in our minds. And I would also say the last year or two, there's been a huge groundswell towards taking the workforce component of it more seriously. The Defense Intelligence Agency CIO, he came out with a 4-pillar strategy, and the first pillar is talent management. And when I heard that, I was thinking, okay, an intelligence agency CIO is putting talent management as the first pillar of their technology strategy. Somewhere there's a tear in the very fabric of time and space, and I want to make sure that I don't get sucked into it, because that just doesn't happen. At the last DOTIS Worldwide conference, pretty much every plenary speaker talked about how important the talent management was and developing a high-tech workforce. That said, when we go to the breakout sessions for that very same conference, there were like 80 or 90 breakout sessions, and only 3 of them were related to talent, and they were all during the same hour, so you could only attend one. So we have a little bit of a say-do gap, if you will, the delta between what we say is important and how we actually execute. And I think that's for 2 reasons. One, a lot of military organizations, and especially within the Navy, are platform-centric, right? How do we describe the Navy? We talk about the need for a 355-ship Navy or a 350-ship Navy. We don't talk about how many sailors it takes to do that. We talk about how many ships. Whereas if you look at the Marine Corps, the unit of measurement is a Marine and his rifle, right? So it's a different mindset as far as how we look at that. We look at how many aircraft carriers, how many battle groups, how many ESGs we can deploy, not how many sailors. It's just not the way we are trained to think in that service. I think the other reason is because it's harder than anyone wants to admit, right? So we have this paradigm where we talk about hard skills and soft skills. And I submit that if those were soft skills, we'd be a lot better at it, right? And I found that a lot of, whether they're civilian managers or military leaders, especially on the technical side, right? If you look at the bookshelf of a senior technical manager, you'll see your CISSP manual and maybe your certified ethical hacker and a whole bunch of books, on everything from Python and OSI layer. How many books are you going to see on the average technical manager's bookshelf about leading people, right? About leading change, about speaking with influence, right? How much time and energy does your average technology leader spend on those so-called soft skills?
Yeah, I think that's it's such an important point, and I know it's something I've been looking at in the past couple of years too, because I don't know. It sounds like you've seen my bookshelf, right? Like I've got Python, I've got CCSP, I've got and it's true, right? I think really until the last couple of years, looking into like human factors and psychology and what does that mean to cybersecurity, right? That comes back to emotional intelligence and empathy and how do we talk to each other? How do we perceive things? All of those pieces that come into those soft skills. So that sort of, it leads perfectly into my next question, because I have all those certifications, right? Like I have all those certification books too. So where do you think we sort of place the value on education, certifications, versus those soft skills? And do you think that there's still value in certifications in that education, or do you think that we need a better balance of both?
So you covered a lot of ground there. I'm going to go with better balance of both. Anybody who's worked with me or for me for more than 5 minutes has heard my speech about I don't like absolutes. I would say there are no absolutes, but that would be an absolute. And I'd risk that aforementioned tear in the fabric of time and space. So I'm not going to say there are no absolutes, but I don't really like them. As far as the certifications and education go, it's one data point in kind of a whole person assessment, right? We're not hiring machines, right? We're not buying an app to do a thing that happens to be in a meat sack, right? You're hiring a whole person. On the government side, and to some degree in commercial sector employment that's not at will, you have to have some meaningful way to be able to say this person is qualified because of something other than I talk to them and I like them, right? So education is a good way to set them apart. Do they have a relevant degree in the field? Data point. Do they have a certification in the field? Data point. Do they have 20 certifications in the field? Data point. The where I think the certifications fall short and some forms of education is in the way we've gravitated towards sort of multiple choice testing, right? So when you have a certification that's based on a multiple choice test, you've not proven to me or anyone else that you can do the thing. You've proven that you know the thing well enough that when faced with 3 wrong answers and 1 right answer, you can pick the right one. You haven't told me that you can demonstrate what the right answer is in a complete vacuum, right? Because how often in the workplace does the boss come in and say, I need you to come up with a strategy for something, and by the way, here's the right one and 3 wrong ones, pick the best strategy, right? That's not a thing, right? That doesn't happen. Nobody's going to ever say, hey, Seaman Timmy, I need you to configure the firewall, but I'm not going to tell you what the port numbers are. I'm going to give them to you in text, and I'm not going to tell you what to defend against in any meaningful way. I'm going to obfuscate it so that you have to demonstrate that you know what these ports and protocols are and get them right on a simulation. Now, for me, that whole simulation of configuring a firewall is a failure, because if that person isn't going to that, to the workstation to configure the firewall with it all written out as to how it's supposed to be, I would like to fire them, right? I don't want them to guess, right? So we're kind of training bad habits there. I do think certifications have value because at the very least, it demonstrates that they were able to absorb the material and under controlled circumstances, recount that material in a meaningful way. I will say it's very interesting that if you look at all of the cybersecurity certifications, there's a project management certification that's always top 10 in terms of industry value, and it has nothing to do with cybersecurity. Nothing. I have that certification. There's nothing to do with cyber or cybersecurity. It's your ability to lead and manage a team, your ability to get a project done, right? So again, I do think they have value. I do think they have a place. I think when you have a requirement to be able to meaningfully quantify the qualifications of an applicant, I think they help you do that. But I don't think that just because you have a certification, you're all that in a bag of chips. I've met a lot of people with degrees that I don't know how they got through. It's a data point in a whole person strategy.
Yeah, I love that picture too, though, right? It's about the whole person. What was their motivation behind getting the certification, right? Is it because they wanted to learn a new area, of expertise or learn a new skill or something like that, versus I have to get it for my job. I need to get it in 6 months. It's sort of like those 2 differing sort of tracks there. Well, you posted posted an article about on LinkedIn just maybe a couple of weeks ago about how North Dakota is requiring cybersecurity education specifically for K through 12 for schools, which I think is amazing. Because I'm a mom, I have 2 kids, and they're starting to get to those ages where they're starting to get interested in technology and having iPads and things like that. And fortunately, they have a mom in cybersecurity, so I joke that they're kind of screwed anyway because I'm going to be monitoring everything. But I'm curious, if sort of how you feel about that. Do you think there's going to be maybe we'll see more states or maybe even at some point federal legislation around cybersecurity?
Well, first, it makes me feel great that somebody's actually reading my LinkedIn page. So thank you for that. Second, we are, with every passing day, our cyber world, if you will, that underlying cyber infrastructure is a more and more important part of our physical lives. So by way of example, it was just yesterday or the day before that I think Alaska Airlines announced they're no longer going to have kiosks at the airport for you to check in. You're going to have to use your mobile device, or you're going to have to print out your ticket at home. And God bless you if you have the discipline to print out your ticket at home. And I mean, I use my printer so infrequently that it needs ink just about every time I have to print a single page. It's the most expensive piece of equipment in my house, just because of the way that works. So you're at the point where your mobile device is part of you. Like, you cannot function without it. And I don't say that metaphorically. I mean, literally, if you lose your cell phone, it's worse than losing your house keys. Your entire identity is wrapped up in that. You know, there are a lot of people that give Star Trek, credit for the communicator and a lot of technology that we have today. I submit that the Comlocks in Space 1999, where it's not only your communicator with video, but the thing that opens all the doors and allows you to access all the equipment, that was actually much more prophetic in terms of how things work. So as far as that K through 12, there are a lot of bad actors in cyberspace. There are people who will steal your identity, who will ruin your credit, who will trick you into providing compromising information, right? Whether you're in the military or in the intelligence community or just some random 8 to 12-year-old. There are state actors, there are pedophiles, and I think educating children as early as possible so that they can use this technology that's going to be a part of their lives, right? You can have a conversation about whether it should be, but it is, one way or the other. This technology is going to be an integrated part of everyone who is born from now and in the future. That train has left the station. So we can either start training kids to use it responsibly, to be able to protect and defend themselves as individuals and their friends and their families and their very identities, or we can not and roll the dice. And I'm not big on the roll the dice strategy. So I like the article about North Dakota, because it's to me, I was a little shocked. I was like, really? North Dakota's the first, like, nobody else is doing this yet? I just assumed it wasn't on my radar, but the fact that they were the first to integrate it into their curriculum, kudos to them. It should be federally mandated, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're spot on in terms of the need for digital literacy, I guess, for lack of a better way to phrase it. It's just as fundamental as, financial literacy. Like you said, the phone, the ubiquitous use of technology is so pervasive in all of our lives, even children, that the idea of not informing and equipping people, it just doesn't even seem to make sense that we're not doing this already.
So I'll say, analogous to the training at the young age in cybersecurity, there's been no shortage of congressional testimony from military leaders about recruiting challenges. And part of that recruiting challenge isn't even that people don't want to join the military. The military actually has a lot of very attractive qualities. But when you eliminate all the people who are obese, all the people who the education system has failed, all the people who have substance abuse problems, the swath of qualified applicants to get into the government and the military becomes very, very small. So I would say that, perhaps in heresy towards, in my line of work, biggest threats to national security are poor nutrition education, and just poor education in general. And we really, as a country, need to get on the ball and start fixing that.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. Essentially, as you said, underneath all the technology and the workforce discussion and all the activities we do are people. So it all comes back to the people and the, quality and preparedness of us as individuals and citizens to, provide national security. So I wanted to ask you too, you and I have talked a little bit about, the Department of Navy's approach when it comes to modernizing the workforce and cybersecurity. And, it's no secret that, the government, including the Navy, has historical challenges of attracting, retaining technical talent and, promoting folks throughout the ranks and things like that when it comes to technical specialties. So I'm curious to hear, how's the Navy approaching the cybersecurity workforce challenge?
So I get questions like that a lot. And let me start with the Navy's part of the Defense Department, right? So generally the Navy strategy is, within 5 degrees port and starboard of what the DoD strategy is. And DoD very recently came out with the first cyber workforce strategy, 2023 to 2027. and I'm incredibly grateful to the DoD leadership for putting that out there, and it goes back to what I said earlier about the last year or two. We've really started to see some movement on taking the cyber workforce a lot more seriously than we have. We updated the training qualification manual for the first time since I think 2005, just 2 months ago, and the DoD strategy basically lays out 4 goals. The first one is consistent assessment and analysis, right? A much greater emphasis on data on what we need and what we're going to need to fill it as the technology evolves. You know, everybody's talking about AI and everybody's talking about data science, but in order to have enough people that are AI literate 5 years from now, we really need to start hiring now. So we have to be a little bit of in some ways we have to be very self-aware, and we have to self-assess, and in other ways we have to be outright fortune tellers and figure out what we're going to need in the future without knowing what, you know, we have to kind of place bets on what the future is going to be, and hire against that. The second goal is an enterprise-wide talent management. Again, better coding, better understanding of what particular jobs are, standardization of position descriptions, so we're comparing apples to apples in what people are doing. The third goal is the one that I kind of poked at. This is going to be the hardest one, which is a cultural shift to optimize department-wide personnel management activities. And within government, you know, Chris, you were military and government. Your mileage may vary. There are some people that have had exceptional experiences with HR. They had good managers, they had good supervisors, and there are some people that have left the military thinking that was the most toxic thing I've ever experienced. And we need to kind of lift all the boats at one time on that, and do better across our leadership and supervisory cadre, both in uniform and as civilians. And then the last one is sort of the recurring collaboration partnerships, whether it's interagency or with foreign partners. Learn from our partners, do rotations, allow people. There's a new rotational program that allows people doing cyber jobs to go to other organizations in the interagency and come back. So in the intelligence community, they have a requirement for something called joint duty credit, where you literally have to go work for another agency for a year or two and get credit for working somewhere else to prove that you're broad enough to be above a certain level of executive. So again, from a Navy standpoint, we're kind of all in on the DoD strategy, and DoD is really moving out smartly in the last year or so.
Yeah, I like several aspects of what you said there. The first part, in terms of, I think it was the second part actually, in terms of, you know, the experience that we each may have had and how that's impacted our, you know, experience and the way we feel about our involvement with government. And I think that can have a cascading impact on how people communicate it to their children or friends or peers who may look to serve in some capacity. And then also the piece about the interagency service. I think it's so critical, because we often hear about, you know, silos and agencies not working together, sharing information. So I think that allows people to go and see how others are tackling challenges and problems, and maybe bring some insights that are valuable, as well as bring some of those insights back when you return to your home agency or home base where you came from. So I think it's a really great program. I hope to see it grow and get a lot of adoption. Another thing I wanted to ask you too is there's been buzz about the Department of Navy cyberspace superiority vision. You know, what exactly does that entail? And you know, I'm sure workforce is a piece of it, but I'm curious to hear a bit more about it.
So the CSV, the Cyberspace Superiority Vision, there's actually not a big workforce component of that. I'm still incredibly proud of it. It basically boils things down to 3 pillars: secure, survive, strike. By way of background, several years ago, the Department of Navy CIO came out with the Information Superiority Vision, and the 3 pillars of the ISV were modernize, innovate, and defend. And without going too deep on that, where the Cyberspace Superiority Vision picks up from the Information Superiority Vision, is secure sort of overlaps with defend, right? Secure, like, so from a Navy perspective, when a ship is underway, there's always some level of watertight integrity, right? You close certain doors so that if there's an accident, if the ship is struck by a weapon, the flooding can only go so far before it's contained. And the more risk the ship is in, the more of those watertight boundaries you keep secure in case of a problem. So secure kind of picks up overlapping very heavily with defend in the ISV. And then we move into survive, where secure is cybersecurity, survive is cyber resiliency. And it's basically, no matter how well we protect a ship, no matter how many close-in weapon systems, chaffs, flares, whatever, there's always an assumption that you're still going to have damage control teams because you're still going to take a hit. And your ability to fight hurt and keep your ship in the fight, able to maneuver, able to respond, able to achieve your mission, it's no different in cyber. We have to learn to fight hurt. We have to learn to recover quickly. And it goes in terms of the national defense strategy as part of that integrated deterrence through resiliency. It's how much money can we get the adversary to spend to attack us where we can just shake it off and say, okay, yeah, that was a good hit, but we're back up and running 5 minutes later and we're still in the fight. And that's our survive. And then strike is the ability to disrupt, degrade, or destroy an adversary capability, whether it's a state actor or non-state actor. If somebody starts something, we'd like to be able to finish it. And so from a linear perspective, make it secure, make it resilient, be able to hit back. And that's our cyberspace security, our superiority vision, secure, survive, strike. We have coins.
Yeah, I really like the way you phrased it. And in my opinion, something that kind of stood out as you kind of walked through that is, the emphasis that cyber is a domain of warfare now. A lot of parallels to traditional warfare and, kinetic engagement, for example, that we're seeing now spill over to the cyber domain. As I actually just finished reading a book called The Fifth Domain that talks about cyberspace as a piece of, warfare, basically. And you kind of use those terms that made me think of that. So last question I had for you is, we all obviously saw the recent release of the National Cyber Strategy, and I'm sure the DoD and Department of Navy and so on will look to build on that and, get synergies with the themes and direction that has taken the nation. I'm curious your perspective on that recent release, as well as, where you think we're headed with DoD and DON.
So I'm very grateful for the release. We've had a Department of Navy cyber strategy as the sort of much more expanded version of the Superiority division percolating for about a year now. We're because there is a pecking order, right? We have to wait for the national strategy. We have to wait for the DoD strategy to get the DON strategy out. So because the DoD strategy hasn't been released yet, and because the DON strategy hasn't been, we're not approved for release until the DoD strategy comes out. I'll speak in broad sense in terms of where those synergies are that you asked. In the national cyber strategy, it talks very heavily about defending critical infrastructure, and where the PCA is perhaps a slightly divergent from the CIO is looking at that operational technology, those industrial control systems, the cybersecurity of weapon systems is a core focus for us. So in terms of our strategy, it's very heavy on the protection of hull machinery and engineering equipment, aboard ship, steering, electronic navigation, these things that we don't really look at as traditional cyber problems. They don't run Windows. You don't get a blue screen of death, but somebody's punching something into a control panel on the bridge, and something's happening in the engine room, and there's some kind of cyber in the middle of that. And locking down those vulnerabilities and making sure that if a vulnerability is exploited, that we can recover and get back in the fight, as soon as possible. So that defense critical infrastructure and the national cyber strategy, that's very heavy in the draft of the DON cyber strategy. And then similarly in the national cyber strategy, there's disrupt and dismantle threat actors. And obviously, since we're looking at cyber effects, whether it's, our intelligence support to cyber or the actual, cyber effects capability, there's a lot of alignment between the Department of the Navy strategy and what will be the DoD strategy and the national cyber strategy. And then I will say that the part of the national cyber directors, the national strategy, mandates a national cyber workforce and education strategy to come out. And in this particular one, DoD actually got in front of the national one with the DoD cyber workforce strategy. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what they come out with at the national level for that cyber workforce and education. And there is a workforce pillar within the DON cyber strategy as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of great information coming out around workforce, which I think is great. So to so to kind of wrap us up, because we've covered a number of different topics from workforce to strategy. What and of course take whichever spin you'd like to take, whether workforce, cyber, strategy, resiliency. But what does cyber resiliency mean to you?
Cyber resiliency to me, again, as a from a Navy perspective, I'm career. I've been Navy for 30 years now, give or take. Means our ability to stay in the fight. Means our ability to fight hurt. Means our ability to recover. It is unrealistic to think that no matter what we do, no matter how vigilant we are, that we will be impervious to attack, whether in the physical world or the cyber world. Right. The reality is that we always have to plan for something to get through, and our ability to take that hit, recover from it, and be back on mission in an unbelievably quick amount of time, that to me is resiliency. Fighting hurt, recovering.
I love that, like concise and to the point, right? I wanted to say a huge thank you, Josh, for joining us today, for talking to us about all things DON, workforce, education, K through 12, certifications. We sort of covered the gambit. So thank you so much for coming and joining us this week. That's going to take us out for this week, and we'll see everybody next Friday. Thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me.